Camp Constitution is taking a road trip across the country to Sonoma, California, and we are here at the Uncle Sam Museum in Sonoma. And this museum is owned by Jean-Pierre and Cecile Moreau. They're the same folks who own the Sam Wilson House, the boyhood home in Mason, New Hampshire. And this is before you go into the museum, there's a part here where Mr. Moreau wants people to know who the original Sam Wilson is, the man who became the figure. So here you see these little boards here. It tells you the daguerreotype of Sam Wilson, a little bit about his background, his activities during the War for Independence, the Revolutionary War, and how Uncle Sam Wilson was acknowledged as the person who was the figure of the United States, or the national symbol. Uncle Sam was born in Arlington, Massachusetts. He was a courier for Paul Revere in the Committees of Safety as a very young boy. He was only 9 years old at the time that Paul Revere passed through his neighborhood, and his father and his older brothers answered the alarm, the Battle of Concord and Lexington, and also Bunker Hill. Sam was only 9 years old, but a few years later he became a courier for the Committees of Safety. And they moved to Mason, New Hampshire, where there's the homestead is still there, and it's now owned by Jean-Pierre and his wife Cecile. And in July of this year, our campers will have a nice field trip to that place. But then anyway, Mr. Wilson moved to Troy, New York, which was sort of the western frontier in those days. A lot of opportunities for a young man to make his fame and fortune. He got into the brick making business, meat packing business, and that is where he became known as the Uncle Sam. He was a very much beloved figure, and Uncle Sam, and along with his brother, the Wilsons, had a meat packing business. They got a contract with the U.S. government, and the barrels we marked U.S. And one of the men that used to work for Sam, he was a soldier or a sailor on one of the ships. He said, "Oh, that's Uncle Sam Wilson." And by the way, this sign you're looking at was the original sign that was on the house next to the house in New Hampshire. It was Jean-Pierre and his wife that were able to get a new sign with a few corrections. Here is a pile of bricks that were once part of this house that Sam Wilson owned in Troy, New York, and they tore the house. This was actually not the house that they lived in, but I think it was a warehouse that was owned by Wilson. And it's possible that Uncle Sam made these bricks. We're not certain, but if you go to Arlington, Massachusetts, you'll see a statue on Massachusetts Avenue, and in Troy, New York, you can visit his gravesite, and you'll see the statue that you're looking at now. Jean-Pierre had a lot to do with cleaning up the gravesite and making it a little more well known. And here it is. How did Uncle Sam become Uncle Sam? It says here October 1st, 1812. And by the way, they put out a nice little book, The Story of Uncle Sam, which they make available, sort of a picture history book, and it gives you an idea of not just Uncle Sam himself, but some of the history of the War for Independence, Revolutionary War. Who Was Uncle Sam is the name of the book. So now we're going to take a walk into the museum itself. And this is a very beautiful country here in California. It's a little north of San Francisco in wine country. And the Moreaus actually do make wine, and of course they would call it Uncle Sam wine, as well as having they have a very unique, we wouldn't call it a kennel. They have a place where they board cats and dogs, and it's almost a museum in itself of vintage posters with cats and dogs. So here we're walking into the museum, and there is my lovely wife boning up on her Uncle Sam. And every poster here in this museum is an original poster. This is the largest collection of Uncle Sam posters in the world. And each one has its history in itself, and Jean-Pierre needs to at some point put the information down in a book form. This collection was accumulated within 6 years, so it's quite remarkable. And not only do you see the posters, but you see a lot of memorabilia, a lot of things you might find in a novelty store, but some very interesting things. There's a payphone here. Here's an original poster of 1902, and these posters, of course, have so much history. A lot of these were lithographs, and as I learned a lot about lithographs today, that the lithograph, the paper that's used, is waterproof and it can be cleaned up. And Jean-Pierre had these. Not only did he have these posters framed and cleaned up and restored and matted, but it's quite a process just doing that. These are some of the few of the books that he has to offer for sale. And here's a picture here. This was actually a photo of people, something like 10,000 people in the image of Uncle Sam done in an aerial photography. Here you see, this was a daguerreotype. It's an original daguerreotype of Mr. Sam Wilson, the original Uncle Sam. And here's a book on display of a book that I'm just reading now. It's called On the Road for Uncle Sam by Joey Adams. And the Moreaus, in addition to, they also make wine. And of course it's called Uncle Sam Wine, Uncle Sam Vineyards. This wine is not sold. What was that? Uncle Sam Cellars, that's right. And of course Uncle Sam says, I want you to drink my wine. These posters span World War I, World War II, prior to World War I and World War II. A lot of World War I collection here. And you actually even has a collection of foreign language posters, mostly French, but also here this would be Israeli. And as I said, every poster has an interesting story behind it. Yeah, this is Jewish, Israel, and basically it's saying that, hey, if we can help the Australians during World War I, there's no reason why we can't help the Jewish children in Israel in 1948. And of course, the United States has been a very strong ally of the nation of Israel. In addition to the posters, there's a large collection of original art work of Thomas Nast. Now, Thomas Nast is a very interesting character. He's the one that gave us the symbol for the Democrat and Republican parties, the elephant for the Republican and the donkey for the Democrat. And the term nasty, as I understand, came from Thomas Nast. People would look at his illustrations and his nasty illustrations. He was very critical, and in some cases rightly so. And there are so many posters that they can't possibly all put on display. And in fact, on the floor here, you see a banner that was in the USS Enterprise, a museum that was docked in New York City. And they refurbished it, remodeled it, and there was a huge Uncle Sam poster which was purchased by Jean-Pierre. And also, the largest poster in the world is 3 of these, and as I walk through it's too big to put on display, but I have a picture of it, which I'll show here a little bit. Again, this museum is not open to the public. You have to make an appointment, and of course, Jean-Pierre just loves to talk to people about Uncle Sam and his collection, and lots of groups have come through here, school groups, individuals, people traveling. Here's sort of a typical World War II poster that portrays Japan in a negative light, which is the case since they did bomb us. Step on it, give them more, and it shows a Japanese being stomped on by a boot of Uncle Sam. And then we see a lot of things about saving energy, don't loose lips sink ships and things of that nature. And a lot of the companies, a lot of businesses that be very patriotic, and it would encourage their workers to support the war effort and what have you. This one here is World War II, and it was a cigar company, and there was so much misinformation about the Soviets and Stalin. The Roosevelt administration was very much enamored by this, probably the worst mass murder in the history of mankind. But here, welcome Big Brother democracy, and it shows USA and Russia like they have the same style of government. Of course, that was a lie, and but most good Americans thought by doing that you'd be supporting the war effort and helping to defeat the Nazis. The Nazis, of course, were an enemy of Russia, and the old saying is the enemy of your enemy is not necessarily your friend. And a lot of the idealistic folks who bought that lie learned very quickly what a monster Stalin was and what a lie. But anyway, Jean-Pierre has a collection of, as I mentioned earlier, some posters from foreign countries. Some of them portray the United States in a very negative light too. He has Cuban posters and a lot of the from communist China, things like that. Yeah, here's the one that we saw a little while ago, the Israeli poster. Well, this was the original Austrian poster right after World War I, where Uncle Sam here is helping the starving children of Austria. Of course, World War I devastated Europe, and as always, the United States was there to help with the relief efforts. And I think our intervention policy made matters a lot worse. Nevertheless, here is on Lafayette We Come, a story of Lafayette, who was our great ally during the War for Independence, the Revolutionary War, and General Pershing, when he came to the United States, he was in charge of the American forces in France during World War I, and I believe he was a great patriot. Anyway, he visited Lafayette's gravesite, and he said that, Lafayette, we are here, saying that, you know, that we're going to help you. You helped us in our time of need, and we're helping you. Yeah, these two mannequins, this was a costume from a professional dancer, and like I said, everything in here has a history. And he actually had to purchase it. It wasn't donated, but he purchased it and put it on display. Here's a collection of magazines that have Uncle Sam depicted in it. You see, it's quite comprehensive, and sheet music. Wouldn't you imagine there's hundreds of Uncle Sam sheet music. We got some Irving Berlin and just piles of it, and it's just fascinating. And he's got magazines, magazine covers, magazine pictures of, and each one was carefully taken out of the magazine and matted, and that was a lot just to compile it. And some of these magazines go back to the 1800s, which was no longer being published, and these beautiful colors they used, as you can see here. And of course, these were sometimes cartoons that were criticizing the issues of the day. And if you don't have a good sense of history, you're probably thinking, what are they talking about here? But here's a picture of the poster that I mentioned a little while ago. The original poster is something like 10 by 15 or 20 by 15, and it's a poster for wine, French wine, and it is the largest poster. Now, it's not really anything to do with Uncle Sam, but the fact is it's part of his extensive collection. But there's 3 of these posters that still exist, and it's quite an art. Poster art is quite an art form in itself, and I think most people that come to this museum learn very quickly that it really is. Here's one that's a little more recent. Uncle Sam wants to, well, you can read it for yourself. This was 1980, shortly after the Iranians, the Ayatollah Khomeini, kidnapped the American embassy officials and held them for hostage for quite a long time. I remember it very well since I was in the U.S. military at that time. And here, Nations United for Freedom, 1943. You see the hammer and sickle on the right. So you see the misinformation that that was being promoted during the war. There was a lot of good information, but there was misinformation, especially concerning the Soviet Union. Here's a poster here of Uncle Sam shaking the statue of Lafayette. And I apologize for the glare. It's really hard to, because all of these posters are preserved in, framed in glass or plastic, which what he recommends. Here's Ross Bicycles. I don't think this poster is all that old. Think American, be American, buy American. That's nice. I don't know if Ross Bicycles is still made, or if they are, they're still made in the United States. Here's something that we couldn't quite figure out what this was when we first got in here. And these are a collection of 7-Up cans. 1976, the bicentennial. There were about 50 different cans, and if you turn them around and put them in this format, you get Uncle Sam. And I don't know if you can see it on this camera, but I don't even remember this going on at the time, but probably something I'd like to collect myself if they're still available. Here you have the limestone that's used for daguerre to making lithographs, and he explained the process, and it's quite special when you have to use more than one color. It was quite a process. So you see these little posters that some people don't even give it a second thought, and it's quite an art form. Well, here's a cutout of Statue of Liberty, and turning over here is a cutout of Uncle Sam. This gentleman will actually be, the man who's depicted here is a professional Uncle Sam reenactor, or impersonator, I think is the title. His name is Fred Polnich. And we actually have Fred's book on our scribd.com page, Camp Constitution, scribd.com, if you want to look it up, scribd.com/Camp Constitution. And actually, between Camp Constitution and my own page, we've been uploading a lot of Uncle Sam writings. We have several books. There were small books, maybe 50, 60, 70 pages of the history of Sam Wilson, as well as the hearings of the U.S. Senate in 1961, determining who the real Uncle Sam is. It's about 80 pages long. So it's either up at the Camp Constitution Scribd page, scribd.com, or you'll find it on mine, scribd.com/H Shurtleff, SHURTLEFF. And to learn more about our camp, just go to Camp Constitution, where you'll find links to not only Fred's site, but other Uncle Sam information. And if you'd like to get information on getting an appointment to visit this museum, or the House Museum in Mason, New Hampshire, just go to our website, Camp Constitution website, and we could put you in touch with Jean-Pierre and Cecile. They do not have a website at this point on their own for their museum and their house in Mason, but we'll be happy to put you in touch with them. And the book that Jean-Pierre did is probably available on Amazon. I'm not certain. I don't know if I've seen it up there, but if not, Camp Constitution makes them available, and actually proceeds to the sale of the book will go to help Camp Constitution. Here's the book here, Who Was Uncle Sam, and it's a nice little picture booklet of the various stages of Uncle Sam Wilson and how he became the figure. Here's a nice poster that was put together by Jean-Pierre about Uncle Sam himself, and these are available. Actually, if you're ever in Concord, New Hampshire, the state capitol, these are on sale there too.